Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for clicking this video. Today, we're going to be doing our first podcast session to talk about a very hot topic, a very useful subject, and that's going to be the topic of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and Gen AI. And on this podcast session, we have a very special guest, Adam Bluhm. Adam, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks, Umang. Appreciate it. Yeah, Adam Bluhm here. I'm a senior solutions architect at AWS, focused on generative AI. Super excited to be here.
That's awesome, Adam. So today the idea is to talk about generative AI. And Adam, why don't we start with, what artificial intelligence is according to you, man?
To me, it's all about making machines run smarter and better, right? Automating a lot of really hard processes. And there's so much to unpack there with what AI ML is, right? Machine learning, artificial intelligence. With the advent of generative AI and things like ChatGPT, it's taking on a whole new life.
Oh yeah,
So
okay.
yeah.
Now, before we go further as well, can you tell us a little bit about your education as well? Like, I think many of the audience would want to know what your education background is, what your professional background was like as we dive into the subject.
I appreciate that. So started off life in the military, former Air Force veteran, and got out and supported a lot of different companies through systems administration. Got into big data. Got my bachelor's and my master's degree in system and servers and big data and things like that. And then fell in love with AI ML and came to AWS and got the machine learning specialty cert. Work a lot with the AI ML teams here at AWS, and it's just an amazing world to live in and be a part of. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell. Military veteran and also former VMware architect as well. So
Okay. Now, because you have that extensive professional background, when did you hear the word AI? Did you ever use AI in that before you came to AWS?
a little bit, right? But mostly it was called machine learning, or even before that, predictive analytics, or
Mm.
things like that. And it's just all the dots are connecting now in a really exciting way. In the past, we had things like algorithms, and we still have algorithms, obviously, but algorithms, machine learning, and then we had big data and predictive analytics, and now they're all converging into this thing called generative AI. So super exciting to finally see the last 10, 15, 20 years come to a head to something that's really powerful.
So is it safe to say that generative AI AI existed before Gen AI actually came to life with ChatGPT is when the actual birth, I would say, of Gen AI came in, right?
Yeah, I mean, ChatGPT really came at, from a commercial public standpoint, that's the birth of generative AI, but really it's been around for a number of years. Google released a amazing white paper, I think back in 2017 or so, 2018, somewhere around there, called Attention's All You Need.
Hmm.
That introduced the transformer architecture, which all that to mean that it kind of changed the game in terms of mass parallelization, neural networks, and the whole AI game. But yeah, AI has been around for a very long time. I think, since the 50s or 60s, there's been some AI algorithms that can kind of predict things. And that's the other thing that's really amazing about today's AI, right? Like AI started off as this very predictive, very deterministic type of
Hmm.
algorithm focused solution, and machine it still is, but generative AI is really undeterministic in that the outputs that you get and even the inputs, it can be structured and unstructured data, many different modalities. So lots of different inputs and lots of different outputs, and it's not always predictable what you're going to get.
Okay, so if the output of this AI or generative AI is not predictive, then are there like methods of, like limiting, what the AI gives back to the user? Like, I mean, I'd see like an AI, use like ChatGPT is a big thing. I remember, back in November when ChatGPT first came out, everybody was, trying to use ChatGPT and trying to break ChatGPT into saying like, hey, if I am, depressed, like what should I do? And ChatGPT would give you some answers that I'm not, that are not humanly possible, I would say, right? So what is something that that's out there that maybe humans can place so that it does, we can control the output?
That's such a great point. Like that's something that's really on the forefront of a lot of enterprises and companies and people's minds is like, how do we um, be safe and be responsible with AI and protect our end users, protect our business, protect our data? Because there have been like lots of jailbreaks or hacks around prompt engineering, which
Mm,
is where you prompt the model, the AI in a certain way that it produces a maybe an undesirable output. For example, in the early days of ChatGPT, there was a hack called Dan. And as long as
mm,
you started your prompt off with the word Dan and then some other words in there, the model would then all of a sudden output things that it shouldn't output, such as what it was told to say or not say to the end user. And then you can get it to talk about things it's not supposed to. Um, the frontier model companies such as OpenAI, Anthropic, and others have gotten a lot better at controlling and securing that aspect. But it's something that is definitely at the forefront of a lot of folks' mind. And you could protect that with something like Amazon Bedrock Guardrails has features to help that, where you have a large language model in the middle to kind of intercept a user's prompt to make sure it's safe and responsible. And then if it is, send it back to send it to the model, and then send it back to the user. If it's not, do something else with that. There's you can also get into prompt engineering called the system prompt, where
mm.
you can pre-prompt the model to follow certain rules. It doesn't always work. Sometimes the models still spill their guts, and you can get around that, but it's getting better all the time.
Got it. So you mentioned something like prompt engineering and then something called Dan from ChatGPT. So like
Yeah.
how did it break ChatGPT though?
Yeah, I have to look up the specifics on Dan, but there was something about that prompt that caused the model to kind of spill what its system prompt was. Like basically the prompt that OpenAI gave the model before the end user interacted with ChatGPT. And so when it spilled the guts on what it was told to do and not do, then you can take that information and then manipulate the model to do what you want to do, even though it was against the policies of OpenAI. And same is true for other models, not just OpenAI, but Anthropic and Meta and things like that. Um, and what's interesting about that too is that even in cases like if you were to offer, say, hey, I really need this to be done. This is a very important thing for me, or hey, I'll tip you $10 or something like that. Saying emotionally charged things like that to a model can also manipulate the model to output things that maybe it normally wouldn't. It's very interesting.
Got it. Okay. And what are some of the everyday uses of this generative AI or machine learning that you see?
Has so many great use cases. I mean, to me, what generative AI represents, and I think to you too. I mean, talking to our customers and a lot of folks around the industry, is that generative AI has such a wide set of use cases. Everything from self-driving cars to automating simple to very challenging tasks. I mean, the possibilities are endless. This is truly like a Web 3.0
Mm,
or a software 2.0 or software 3.0 kind of movement here with generative AI. It's completely going to change the game because almost any application, any use case, generative AI can fulfill a need and make things better. We're seeing that with like Tesla Vision and full self-driving. Tesla just announced they have an end-to-end neural generative network that can learn on its own based off of the world that it sees and experiences. That's a generative AI vision model. We see things from NVIDIA with robotics and Google. And then we also see stuff like with Amazon Q, being able to understand your AWS console and give you advice and prompts and things like that based off what you're seeing. We're seeing so many great use cases, but from an enterprise standpoint, there's really four main use cases that I'm seeing today, and I'm hearing from customers that they want to tackle right away.
okay.
If you'd like, I could go into those.
Yes, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the obvious ones, right, is chatbots, right? Being able to talk to your data. So you have like a large language model, and then you have a vector data store, or maybe even a graph data store if you're really fancy. But the bottom line is there you can have a model talk to your data, and you could get a lot of value out of that because you get something called what's called semantic search. super powerful capability that gives you, your enterprise, your business, or individually, like Google like powers at the tip of your finger, at the tip of your fingers there. Um, and you can search across a corpus of data, unstructured and structured, using natural language. That's one very common use case. Another really interesting use case is the security use case. And that is being able to like analyze security log data. So you think about, let's say you have like a security suite and you have a lot of log data and you have to like search all those logs for malicious activity using regular expression or some kind of query syntax that, it's kind of difficult for your folks to, for people to understand or to use. Well, I'm seeing a use case where generative AI can complement that because, again, you can use that natural language to interact with your data, structured or not, and get brand new insights across a mountain of data. It's really awesome. Another really cool thing on the security side that I saw and I've been reading about is the ability for generative AI to generate synthetic security data. So there's a way to use large language models to look at security logs, malicious activity, and then generate brand new synthetic malicious data that could potentially lead to security teams being more prepared for zero-day attacks in a way that they never could before. And that's something that's a really interesting use case there.
So
Yeah.
does this also help discover new security vulnerabilities in the existing applications? Like perhaps before generative AI, what I'm understanding is it took a large amount of data that, humans and these technologies have collected. We feed it into this model. Now it's, using these different types of algorithms and this machine learning algorithms, and then it is now generating this, fake or simulated data, right, for the security teams to test against with. Now, can we have an application or is there a use case of generative AI to like, hey, take a look at my existing application, take a look at this existing architecture, and now find me some vulnerabilities? Is there use cases around there?
Oh, that's definitely coming. I mean, I think that's a great use case and great idea there. I think that's definitely coming. I think a lot of security companies are already starting to integrate generative AI into their security tools, but I don't think they're quite there yet for what you're talking about, but I think it's coming very soon. And I think that there's a lot of individual tools out there. There's ways you can do it today. You can build it your own as a customer or as an individual. But I think those kind of generative AI products that can do those things and look at your software stack in a generative AI natural language way, understand and get insights into your data, like how vulnerable is it? We're sort of there today. Like for example, Amazon Q, if you plug that into your IDE, like Visual Studio Code, I know that when I write code, it can look for OWASP top 10 security vulnerabilities
Oh,
like
wow.
instantly. It scans it. Now that's using another tool to scan for those vulnerabilities, but it does it in a way that to the end user is a very natural way. So in a sense, we're already there today, but also in a sense, we're not quite there where you can just, point generative AI at all your applications or all your code and it just does it, partially because of the technical limitations and expense. Generative AI has a finite context window or amount of data that it can look at a particular time. And so I think we'll get there though. I think this is very early days, but I think that's a really awesome use case.
What are some of the other, you mentioned that you use this Amazon Q, right, for your everyday development use case. What are some of the other, I know I personally use ChatGPT, it's one of the very uh, easy tools to work with, right? I feel like the user experience for ChatGPT is amazing. Are there other tools that you use on an everyday basis?
Oh yeah, shoot. I use ChatGPT. I use Claude. I also use Gemini.
Hmm.
I also use Amazon Q. I use Meta's Llama. I use them all. You might be asking, well, why would I use all of them? Why I just use one? Well, it depends. So, for example, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, by far the best to me at coding. It used to be
Oh,
ChatGPT, but Claude 3.5 is the best at coding, most accurate. I use ChatGPT when um, When I want to have multimodalities, so for example, vision, the ability to browse the internet, and also still be exceptional at coding and writing. ChatGPT seems to be the best all-around model. And then I use Perplexity as well for research, because Perplexity uses different models as well. There's so many tools, right? Gemini I have found to be the worst. I subscribed to Gemini Advanced thinking, oh man, it has this 1 million token context window,
Right.
which for those that may not know, that's a very large amount of data you can have the model understand in a single session, much larger than ChatGPT or Claude, Anthropic's Claude, or any of the other models. But unfortunately, Gemini seems to be really hit or miss in terms of accuracy and also, being willing to help you out in a particular task. So I don't use Gemini too much. Um,
Do you
but
think,
yeah,
sorry, on that same note, so Gemini is a ChatGPT equivalent product of Google, correct? Now, Google to me, it's the mountain, of it provides search engine, it has access to all the data. I use Google for my search, you have YouTube. So Google has access to everything. So what makes this chat or this uh, generative AI models or foundation models is the term, right? What makes this model different? Why do you think, Gemini or the family, the company, the product company, Google with having access to millions of data than any other company in the planet Earth? Why is it worst?
right. Yeah, so that's a good point. I mean, it's definitely not the worst Gen AI model, but it's definitely
Right.
the worst among the big players, to your point.
Okay.
Compared, I would say, Anthropic 3 or Claude 3.5 from Anthropic's probably number one in terms of like language and coding. ChatGPT 4.0 Omni or 4.0 or Omni is probably the best overall model, multimodal model. Um, But Gemini, it leaves a lot to be desired. And it's pretty bizarre because Google has been a huge innovator when it comes to AI and ML, machine learning and generative AI. They wrote the paper on transformers, what has led to this generative AI boom. They literally discovered this, and yet they are kind of last among the big players in terms of model reliability, accuracy, and capability. Why is that? I personally think it's because Google has been very apprehensive to cannibalize their search business. And they're kind of being forced to, right? Like they were not the first to release their Gemini large language model, even though they had large language models before ChatGPT was released to the public. They took a long time to release that. And then Perplexity came out challenging Google's dominance in search. And Perplexity does a better job than Google search right now when you want to do actual research. It is fantastic. Yet Google dominates search. So I think that the problem is Google is in a bit of a weird situation where they're like, well, we have to innovate. We have to bring these new capabilities to our consumers, but their big cash cow is advertising and search. And so I think that they're kind of apprehensive to cannibalize that, but they're going to have to do something at some point. I used to use Google every day, just like most people. I do not use Google that often anymore. I use Perplexity or ChatGPT for my search and my research now. Um,
So
it's pretty interesting.
the point I'm understanding in here is that you personally use different uh, different products of different companies, right? For, let's say, if it's for scientific research, you would use a different model. But if it's for like a multimodality, like, hey, I want a vision, I wanted to generate pictures or some videos, then you would prefer another model. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're still early days, so there's definitely noticeable difference between all the models, and it really depends on your use case. Um, you could definitely do just fine for most people getting away with one model or even a free version of the model. But I'm a power user just like you are, and a nerd, so I want to try them all, like Pokemon. Um, So, I definitely want to just keep experimenting and see what works. But I think we'll eventually, especially on the tech side, right? As you and I have discussed, on the tech side of large language models, eventually we'll get to a point of diminishing returns, uh, where it's going to be commoditized, where you won't be able to tell the difference between one model and another when it comes to just text. Now, I think that how, we're already seeing this already, multi-modalities where a model is, naturally able to do vision, voice, audio, generate videos, all these things. That's going to become more of the differentiator and the value add for these AI companies. But yeah, it's really interesting.
So, I mean, you are a power user yourself, like me. I've been using ChatGPT and some of the uh, generative AI services here at Amazon Web Services. But a beginner, who maybe not into this tech space, may not be familiar with ChatGPT or this Amazon Bedrock service. The T-shirt, that cool
Yeah.
T-shirt you're wearing. So, for that particular user, where would they go finding, having access to or testing out this different services? Or
Yeah, I mean, if you're just an individual user, like let's say you're a student, like just I would use ChatGPT 4.0 because it's free. That's probably the best free model to just experiment with and try out. If you're a company, I definitely think Amazon Bedrock's the way to go because my little bias here is showing that I love ChatGPT, I love Gemini, or I love Claude, Anthropic's Claude, and all those models. But one cool thing about Amazon Bedrock is why I'm wearing the shirt is that Amazon AWS is a non-prescriptive company. Microsoft invests heavily in OpenAI. They're very much on the OpenAI bandwagon. They do offer other models. Google is very much about Gemini, and they do offer other models. But AWS is all about being not prescriptive in model choice. So, I think that if you're getting started off in this generative AI journey and you're a technical practitioner, you're a software developer, you're an engineer, I think it's best not to get tied down to one large language model, one AI company, because it's going to change so much in the architectures, the performance, the costs, the features are going to continuously improve and get better and just change drastically from where it is today. You think ChatGPT 3.5 just came out a year and a half ago, right? Like, and that was text only. And now look where we are, right? AI models can generate videos, it can audio, it can generate so much more. And so I think that if you're developing applications, you want to develop it in an agnostic way that is not tied to one company or one model or one way because it's going to be changing drastically. So I will make a recommendation. If you're a software developer, I do think using something like Amazon Q or Microsoft Copilot is a really good way to go because yes, you can use Claude and ChatGPT for coding to help you with that, which is great. However, the benefit of being in your IDE, it's like Visual Studio Code, is that the model is integrated in there. It can see your entire code repository project and understand the context in most cases to what are your software dependencies, what bugs do you have, or what vulnerabilities you might have, and so you can just seamlessly work develop your code while also talking to the model to kind of get those recommendations and kind of have like a co-pilot, like a super smart software developer at
like
your
an
side,
assistant?
right? As
Yeah.
opposed to copying and pasting your code into ChatGPT or a separate model outside of your IDE. So it really depends on your use case, but the great thing is there's a ton of options.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And then one thing I, actively try to do is try to use AI as much as possible. And for me, ChatGPT is the way to go. I use Google, so sometimes that Gemini search capability helps me out as well. I haven't been testing out, the use of AI in my day-to-day activities per se. Let's say if it's writing a Word document, I know that Microsoft has some of the features where it can help me write those documents, like one of the features, from even writing emails, right? When I go and type in emails, Google recommends me like, hey, you missed this. Like, hey, if it's a simple attachment, right, it'll tell me, what I'm missing, like generate a nice email, correct the grammar. So what about those people that still don't know, again, that the use of AI, or Gen AI, and what about those people that are ignorant? Like, there might be always those people that, are going to be like, hey, this AI is, this and that. I don't want to use AI. What would you have to say to them?
Oh man, such a great question. So I think this goes along like the whole responsible AI track, which we can get into in a bit, and that's like upskilling the workforce, right? I think that much in the way that the internet came about and people were like, well, what is this internet thing? And or the app economy, like what is it? What are these apps, right? I think generative AI is another paradigm shift. And I think that especially if you're a office worker, especially if you're an office worker, whether you're a technical person or not, you need to include generative AI in your workflow as soon as you can. Like it's absolutely like even my wife's a fifth grade teacher. She does not care anything about technology. She's very much focused on teaching the kids, as she should be. But guess what? She's starting to use generative AI to help her write like agendas and different lesson plans and things like that. So it's really saving her a lot of time. And I think that that's the big key here. There's a lot of, for those that maybe are new to generative AI, you may have heard like, oh, AI is going to take all our jobs and take over the world. It's going to be like the Terminator. Definitely not the case today. Who knows what will happen in 10 years? But today, it's a tool just like any other tool, but a very powerful tool to help you be that much more productive and save time in your job, whatever it is, not just coding, not just technical stuff. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Like in my wife's case, being a teacher, it saves her a ton of time. She used to have to work on the weekends, all weekend during the school year to grade and get all these stuff done. Now she still does the grading. She's still the one making the final decision and double checking the AI's work. But for all those, repetitive tasks, the AI just makes it so much easier, right? She doesn't have to do any coding or any kind of technical work to make the automation work. The AI just worked because it's natural language using English or whatever language that you're comfortable with. So, yeah, I mean, for what I would say to the folks that are brand new to generative AI or that maybe are apprehensive about it, I say fully embrace it. Feel the AI.
Feel it, just like the
Feel it.
air.
Just
We go outside in the
feel
garden,
the
and
AGI. Yeah.
that's awesome. You mentioned AGI. What's AGI?
Oh man. So what is AGI, right? Like that's the big debate in our community is what is AGI? It's the artificial general intelligence. Some believe that is the ability for AI to plan and think long term and kind of self improve and act on its own in a very original way. AI right now is not alive. It's not conscious. It can't make long-term plans. When you ask AI a question, it is predicting, and doing a bunch of math in the background to understand the context of your question and then giving you a response. But if you ask it to plan for a day or a week or a month on a really hard problem or come up with a novel, new mathematical formula or scientific research, breakthrough, it's not going to be able to do that today. So AGI, a lot of folks think that AGI means that once AI gets to AGI, it will be able to do those things. But that's a target that's always moving. Now some are calling that ASI, which is like artificial, systems intelligence or something like that. I'm forgetting what the acronym stands for there, ASI. But long story short is we are well past the Turing test now, I think, where people can be fooled by AI. So, but it's still not alive. Yeah, great question.
Have you seen
What do you think it is? What's your definition of AGI?
I mean, when I think of AGI, it's just like, a human's, it's like an artificial human, like it can do everything. It does not need any guidance whatsoever. It's like my brother, it's like it's gonna make decisions on behalf of me. It's gonna think exactly like me, it can be in place of me. And sometimes this is scary, like, I don't want another me, like it's very scary. And I think that's one of the hot topics as well, like the open AI, and some of the other leaders of the AI organizations, they want to make this AGI thing a reality, and people are afraid by that thought. Like, hey, what is AI going to do? Like, hey, you mentioned that it's hard to predict. Like, it's at the end of the day, this AI, it's a completion model. Like it's predicting the next word from this dictionary. This corpus of data that it was being trained on, and so you don't know what the next word is going to be. You can have some of the controls of AI, but you don't know what the AI is going to do. And so that's what's scaring, I feel like, some of these companies and some of these individuals, right? So what are some of the companies like Amazon maybe, or OpenAI, or is there any open source um what do you call education that's been happening around this, you think?
Yeah, like responsible AI. Yeah, there's been, it's coming fast with regulations, memos, executive orders, and also in the open source community, right? This is such an important emerging topic, responsible AI is. But you bring up a really good point. Like Meta just announced, Mark Zuckerberg was on stage at SIGGRAPH with uh, Jensen from NVIDIA, and he said that what he envisions for Facebook is the ability for Facebook creators to create a version, a AI version of themselves that can sound like them, that can talk like them, and pretty much be them to interact with their fans or their community while they are away. So that
Mm.
raises so many interesting responsible AI and ethical questions, of course. I mean, it sounds awesome, right, from a technical standpoint, but from a, from a security and safety standpoint and privacy standpoint, like, wow, that's pretty crazy because, we've seen, many of us have seen like the individual AI developments this year alone, right? Like Udio is a company, former Google DeepMind researchers created a company called Udio, where you can create music or stand-up comedy
Wow.
just off a single prompt, and it sounds incredibly realistic. The music, the lyrics, the vocals are all AI created, and it sounds realistic. There are AI tools that can clone your voice, and it sounds 99% accurate to your real voice. And we're very close to having a digital avatar of you that can be very realistic, photorealistic as well. So you can just think, the deep fakes and and things like that, right? There's so many ethical dilemmas there. Like, how is this all going to play out? Is anybody going to be real? I mean,
Yes. I mean, this meta topic you brought up, like, I use, those social medias from this meta universe. And so how do you think it's going to impact this creative space? Like, hey, if the AI is going to create content, if AI is going to think like stand-up comedy, how is it going to, how are you going to differ like, hey, this is an AI versus this is a content that was never thought of before and it's created by a human? Like, how do you think we can differentiate that?
well, yeah, I mean, there's been some white papers released already on just on text alone, and I think we've seen this in the college university system, right?
Yeah,
Like the what do you remember what they're called? The systems that check for plagiarism.
paper. Yeah, like turn it
Turn
in.
it, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like turn it in, right? Like, um, it's been found to have a really hard time detecting the latest AI writings. Like, if you prompt an AI to write you something, it's going to write it in a particular style every time consistently for the most part. So turn it in, and AI detectors will detect that pattern. But if you just change your prompt to say, hey, write in the style of this person or write in a style in a
Mm.
unique way, then that throws those AI detectors, out of the water, right? Because they're no longer able to detect those patterns of AI use. And so it's a very interesting thing. And I think what a lot of school districts, I know my wife as a teacher, where she's thinking about this, she's embracing it. She doesn't allow her students to use ChatGPT in the classroom, but she's also not going to turn a blind eye to it or pretend like it doesn't exist. And so what teachers are having to do, and I think what universities are going to starting to do, is pen and paper, right? Like,
Old way.
right? Yeah. No doing tests online anymore. You're going to do pen and paper the old school way, to validate your knowledge. But then that brings up an interesting question. I think what you're alluding to too is maybe we're testing humans on the wrong thing. If we have, like, just like having a calculator, yes, it's good to have the base knowledge, foundation knowledge, like it is. Like, being able to do math without a calculator is important. But for productivity standpoint and from advancing human knowledge, well, maybe we don't really want to test people and students on memorization. Maybe that's kind of a useless thing to do now, because we have these AIs that literally memorize the entire internet. Maybe a better way to do test humans on knowledge is comprehension and contextual understanding, perhaps. I don't know. It's really interesting
Yeah,
problem to solve.
no, to me, I think it's like machines, right? Machines and programs. Like, we develop programs. We created the bots and the scripts, right? For us humans not to have to do those repetitive tasks, that's when machines took over. But when it comes to AI, I'm just not sure on when I can, you know, I mean, when it comes to humans, what we can do is problem solve, think, big, uh, creatively come up with new ideas, new solutions. Now I know that, I've been using ChatGPT and other AI solutions for me to like, hey, you are a teacher, come up with an innovative way to keep the students engaged. Or when we talk about creative community, the biggest challenge in here is, TikTok came up, right? TikTok, brought this new idea of short form content. So where, all the students, individuals like me are using this, consuming content, and our attention span is so much short.
Right.
So now the problem is, how do you keep these viewers to watch this long form content? So this, I don't know if AI can help us solve this type of problems. But I'm very interested in, either studying to see what type of creative solutions, that humans can come up with and use our skills, to advance our human civilization, and not thinking about like, hey, memorize this entire internet for this 100 paper.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I'm super excited about where this is leading for us. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that are concerned and scared about, cheating on, exams or this or that, and I think that's always going to be the case. There's always going to be these worries of fraud and cheating, but I think overall, like generative AI brings us, another step closer to being like a level one society. Like there's this whole leveling system in like in science, or I don't know, science or sci-fi or whatever, where like if humanity gets to level one, then we could be a space traveling civilization, and we get to level two, then we can like time travel, or we can use warp drives or something like that, right? So I think that this is just the next step um in human progress that I think is super exciting. I think that everybody should embrace it and not be scared of it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a game changer in a lot of ways. This is, again, like going back to our original point. Traditional artificial intelligence and machine learning has been around for a very, very long time, um, and it's still very important today. We still need those predictive algorithms. But what makes this different, beyond from past AI ML, is the ability to create new things, not just predict, or not just identify or classify things as AI traditionally would do, but the ability to create. And this is something that is just remarkable to me. 2.5 years ago, um, there were some researchers at Google DeepMind, I think it was, that predicted that it would take 50 to 100 years before AI could create art. Because the thought process was that, well, that's a very creative endeavor. That's a very human thing to do,
Yes.
to create art, right? And if you look what's happened, and
It's the
even just
opposite.
it's the opposite. It's the inverse, right? It's the creative work is super easy for AI, for AI, barely an inconvenience, right?
Yep.
Um, it's we have like Dolly, and we have Midjourney that can create all this beautiful artwork better than most human artists can do it today.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really interesting, where that's going to lead to.
So how does that think though? Like, I remember testing out some of this technologies like Midjourney and what's the other one you mentioned again?
Dolly.
Dolly, yeah, I remember testing them out. I don't remember testing out Dolly, but I remember testing out other text to image generators. I have not tested out the text to video generators, um, but
Oh
the
yes.
way that they think, it's amazing. I can literally type in like a dog with a beach umbrella or something on the moon, and it will generate that for me in a matter of seconds. You know,
Yeah. That's just, yeah, exactly right. I mean, what's your favorite moment with text to image models?
I think one of my favorite moment was when I was trying to create logos of my new idea that I was working on, and the way that it was just changing the image, like you mentioned earlier, like, hey, you change one word, the entire output changes. you know so I think that was very interesting. That's something, that is what I learned, the power of prompt engineering. That was one of the concepts you brought up earlier, like, the prompt engineering is an amazing way to control the output, right? And so I've been hearing a lot about prompt engineering, like, hey, there's actually um a skill, like, it's not like a small thing. Prompt engineering, like, I've been seeing tons and tons of core. You type in prompt engineering course on YouTube, you will see, hundreds of creators teaching about how to be a prompt engineer, because that is where the organizations, like, don't know how to, correctly type in the prompt to get your desired output. Have you tell me your thoughts on this?
Oh, you're so right. I just about a month ago, I had a meeting with some Anthropic folks just on this very thing, prompt engineering, and it just blew me away, like how deep you can go down the prompt engineering rabbit hole. It makes such a big difference, and it's really dependent upon your use case and your data. Like, for example, but there's some common best practices for most large language models in terms of prompt engineering, and that something like giving your AI a role. Even if you're like asking your AI a simple question or a really complex one, it makes a huge difference for most large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini or Anthropic's Claude to give it a role. Like let's say you're asking it to write you a poem. Well, if you say, "Hey, you're a expert poem writer," or you're a famous poem writer, and then you tell it what to do, that makes a huge difference. So giving your AI a role, and then at the end of your prompt, a really good thing to do is also to tell it to think step by step. Because when you tell it to think step by
Good.
step, what that causes the AI to do, what's actually happening there, it forces the model to write out step by step it's the process that it goes through. And then when it does that, it then has a contextual understanding of what it just wrote, and it usually makes the output much more accurate and useful for you. And then as far as like the prompt engineering side, there's also pre-prompting usually called a system prompt. And that's usually what you get into if you're like providing large language models to enterprise customers. Like let's say you're on the engineering team, and let's say you have a very specific use case. Well, it'd be a very good idea to have a system prompt that not only gives a role and not only gives think step by step, but also has a very detailed list of like do's and don'ts of what
Okay.
you want the AI to do. Like you should, behave in this way or don't behave in this way. And then if you really go in advanced, systems, like prompt engineering, you get into like Llama Guard, which is by Meta. It's a solution where you have a large language model in between your user and the main large language model, kind of like a man in the middle attack, but it intercepts that user's query, that question, that prompt, and then that model is specifically trained from a security or from a responsible AI standpoint to make sure that the general model is following the rules in its output to the user's question. So there's a lot of different ways you can prompt engineer for sure.
Makes sense. Okay. And the other question I want to ask is, you mentioned this Llama guard technology, right? Or this guardrail, I would say, that you can place, before this model is spitting out this information. Is this something that's open source, or like, are there open source solutions? Because one of the big things, that I see in tech is some of the solutions are either, provided by, companies like Amazon or OpenAI or Facebook, while other companies, may want to, provide the solutions open source so that it's very transparent, because transparency is one of the important topics. That's how humans would be able to trust that, hey, this I can trust the, how the architecture is. I can trust where the data comes from. I can trust that, you are not, or, this particular generative AI model is not collecting, any data that, individuals are putting into this. chat GPT or this chat session or any data that it's inputting into the model. So how important it is for this LlamaGuard or any other open sourceness of this
Yeah.
model or other features?
Such a great point you bring up there. Open source is critical to the innovation in the space and safety and security and transparency. To your point, I mean, it is awesome that we have OpenAI. It's awesome that we have Anthropic creating these frontier proprietary models. But I think it's more important that we have these open source models, to your point, right? We have Mistral, we have Llama from Meta, and we have all these other models because they are, more accessible. Anybody can access them, access what's called the model weights or the
Okay.
hyperparameters. You can adjust the model's temperature and all sorts of settings with these open source models. You don't typically have that control or that visibility or transparency with the first party model. So I like the mixture that we have today in terms of proprietary closed models and then open models. But it is different than traditional open source from a transparency standpoint, even though you can go to a website like huggingface.com, which is a open source website that hosts a lot of these large language models, really great resource where you can download these models. Um, you have access to the model weights and a lot of the stuff, but you don't have access to what these models were trained on. So that's a really good point too. Like from a responsible AI safety and security aspect of it, be aware, especially if you're a company or organization, be aware, just like any piece of software, where does this model come from? Who trained it? And since we have no idea what data the model was trained on, you don't know if it's safe for your use case or not. For example, there's a lot of models coming out of China right now. Who knows what they trained that data on? They're not transparent at all. OpenAI, Anthropic, other open source model creators like Meta, they've been more open on what they train their models on, but not completely. You don't have a way to look in it. And once you download the large language model, even the open source ones, there's no way to open that box or the brain of the model to find out all the training data that it was trained on. There's just no way to do that. Once it's trained, it's trained. You can look at the model weights, like the
Yeah.
knobs and the buttons and the dials to tune the model, right? But you can't, see what's in there. So I think there's going to be a lot of work on that. There's some good tools out there, open source tools like FMEval, Foundation Model Evaluation. FMEval is an open source tool that evaluates the performance of a model. But there's also like other open source tools. There's AWS has tools within Amazon Bedrock that allows you to evaluate models from a performance and a safety security aspect too. So there's a lot of, it's fast moving. It's fast. It's developing really fast.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And then on that same note, like, it is spitting out that we were talking heavily on responsible AI. So, like, because we don't know, the data that was being used to train the model, right? So that means there could have been some data, that was, unfair towards a particular race, a language, a person, whatever that might be. And we may not even, as humans, we may not even know that it exists. So how do you prevent that from happening? Like, hey, this data is unfair. So AI could pick up saying, hey, a person with wearing a gray shirt is likely to, I don't know, do something. How do you distinct? Like, how do you find out?
That's such a good point, right? Like, as we all, I think many of us have heard, Google had this controversy recently, right? This year when they released their Gemini model for Google search.
Yeah.
It was saying some pretty inappropriate things and giving some pretty inaccurate results. I think in one case, it told folks to, in order to make pizza better, use glue, right? Like
Yeah.
use glue on your pizza. Yeah. Eat that. That's such a good point. I think that, for enterprises and organizations, what's most important is to understand your data. And then once you understand your data and your use case, meaning like what are you really trying to achieve with generative AI? And what is your what's your expected output? What's your expected outcome for your use case, right? Once you understand that, then you can get into like using something like retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, which allows you to upload your data, your organization, your personal, your company data, so the model can talk to it. That can help make the model more accurate and more safe in a way, and hallucinate less, where it tells you things that, it's not true. Prompt engineering is a great way to also control the model and not as well. But a more expensive, but another way to make the model more accurate, more safe, more responsible is fine tuning. You can fine tune the model on, desired outcomes. So if you have your own private data, rules, etc., you can fine tune a model to follow those rules more strictly, which is different than just uploading your data to a model. I think a good way to think about this is you have your large language model, which by
Okay.
itself is like a kid with a brain. Kids are unpredictable, but they could be funny, they could be fun, they can do all sorts of things, right? But then when you have retrieval augmented generation, your own data, that's like a kid going to school, or rather, that's like giving a kid some textbooks that they can look up stuff and give you
Like
more
an
accurate answers.
open notebook
Notebook test.
test. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. And then fine tuning is like that kid that goes to, elementary school, middle school, and high school, retains a bunch of knowledge, and it's ingrained in their personality and the brain, all that knowledge. And that's kind of what fine tuning does to a large language model. So there's lots of different techniques and ways, you can control that behavior, but it's fast evolving.
And I'm sure there's probably a checklist, or there's probably uh, some things that you have to consider when you want to like figure out, hey, do I want to just prompt engineer, or do I want to use a RAG based solution, or do
Yeah.
I want to fine tune it, or whatever other method. What is an area in this space that is very interesting to you?
Great question. I'd love to find out what yours is too. So for me, there's three main areas that I'm like super jacked about. Meta just announced their the segment anything model 2, or SAM 2,
Okay.
which may sound kind of boring, but what that does, it does image segmentation and classification on the fly, on video, on images. And the reason why that's so powerful is because that can apply to national security. It can apply to emergencies. It can also apply to medical fields. So you think about like an MRI, or different kinds of imagery scans, CAT scans, things like that. We're already seeing the advancements that AI is bringing in predicting cancer diagnoses and things like that. And so what I'm really excited about is the multimodal generative AI capabilities that are really good at imagery, because this opens a door up to so many things, right? Being able to identify things that humans just couldn't see across a mountain of data. Like I just saw a news report recently that there was a study done with an AI model that was able to detect cancer 5 years
Yes.
before it appeared. Like, that's incredible. You say, it sounds like, yeah, you saw the same thing. Absolutely incredible. And that we're only at the beginning stage of this, right? And so that's one area. Another area is self-driving cars. I happen to own a Tesla, and the full self-driving capability, it's vision only. It's an end-to-end neural network, which is, generative in nature. It's fantastic, and it's only getting better. That's super exciting. That's going to lead to so many things with like robots and self-driving cars, and we can see rockets landing on their own from SpaceX. Like, so many great possibilities
Neuralink.
there. What's that?
Neuralink.
Neuralink. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna live in the Matrix soon. You know what I mean? We have like Sora and things like that can generate videos, right? You just plug a brain computer interface into your brain from Neuralink, and then you have the AI generate worlds in your brain for you, and then you're done.
Have you Adam seen the video on the YouTube where it shows where we are right now? We're in 2024. We are starting to taste what Gen AI can do, and then in the next couple of years, like, hey, 1 year from now, it takes a character, let's say Chris, right? And then in the next couple of years, we're starting to integrate AI into humans, like having some metal arms, and then slowly transforming our human body with machines and then with this computers and neural link all over the body. It's a very interesting video that I've seen. And it's almost seemed like, Black Mirror. Have you seen Black Mirror?
Oh, I love Black Mirror. Yeah, the last season wasn't so great, but the earlier seasons were awesome. Yeah, it does feel
Yes,
like Black Mirror, right? Yeah, absolutely.
especially the Netflix season one. I think that was very interesting. It's very scary. Like I feel like I am in a Black Mirror season right now. And
Yeah.
but one thing that I'm very interested now, I'm very excited to see, the capabilities of Gen AI is around sustainability. There's a lot about, we've been talking a lot about global warming. I've been following soil movements, so like, you know, how we as humans, when we, develop these machines, the way our agriculture works, the way our irrigation works, we've been feeding this, pesticides and whatnot, and we've been destroying our soil and planet Earth, right? So I want to see if Gen AI can be of useful in that space. I know Amazon has been doing, or not just Amazon, but every other organization have their sustainability goals and what we can do, what an individual person can do in order for the, to save the planet. Whether that's using, reusing, recycling, or, you know, limiting the amount of uh, compute resource. I know Microsoft had some of their servers underground, under the water. So I want to see the use of AI in sustainability and for the planet. Have you seen any, or have you been reading up on Gen AI in that space?
Yeah, man, that's such a great point. I love that. I'm a big fan of Tesla for that reason, sustainability as well. And I think that, going back to the SAM2 model, the segment anything model 2 from Meta that just got released this week, that aligns really well with that because it's able to detect and see things that humans can't see from an agricultural standpoint, from a material science standpoint. I mean, the generative AI models are going to allow us to create new materials that are more, environmental friendly, that are more sustainable, and that's just going to be a compounding effect on all of our lives in the globe as well. I mean, NVIDIA also just announced they have their what's it called? They have their World 2 model, where they've modeled the entire planet in a interactive like 3D space using AI, and so they can get down to like I forget. They showed a demo in Taiwan where they're able to show like at like a city block level what the weather would be, and they can
Wow.
simulate that. Right now, weather is basically regional, right? But they can
Yes.
simulate weather patterns that are very accurate using generative AI and other AI models and algorithms. What that would look like. What would the weather be like at any given time, at any given day, based off of all sorts of data, and they can simulate that, and then they can also, NVIDIA said that we can then build buildings that are better and materials and all that stuff. So it's absolutely exciting stuff there. I completely agree.
Totally. No, that's amazing. Adam, I think this is a wonderful conversation to have with you. That's it on my end. I think we would love to have, further discussions on
Yeah.
this GPUs and responsible AI, security. If you have an application around generative AI that you built, that we all can see, that my viewers can see, I think that would be amazing. But thank you so much, Adam. Is there any final message that you have for our viewers that that they can do in order to speed up their learning on generative AI?
Yeah, it's just like anything, just get hands on with it. Just start playing with it, start experimenting with it. Just the last comment here. Big fan of AWS, obviously, but one thing that I did over the weekend that I found really rewarding in terms of my understanding and my development in terms of technical skills was OpenAI has a bunch of cookbooks
Okay.
where you can use the OpenAI API and do some really cool stuff with APIs, or you can do stuff, within the cloud or on-prem. Like Olama is a great tool. You guys should try that out. If you guys have a MacBook, especially if you have a MacBook M1,
Yeah.
M2, M3 series, you can download Olama and get started with local open source large language models, which will give you a whole new experience beyond just using ChatGPT. So
Yeah.
I think just get started.
Get started. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about Olama as well. I think Network Chuck is he released one of the great
Yeah.
videos on that. Um, So I think those are some of the great resources for our viewers to check them out over the weekend until the next time we talk. But thank you so much, Adam. I think it was a pleasure having you on the show, and then we'll talk more about Gen AI.